You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Do you ever have a kiddo pop into your office last minute and you need an activity to do quickly? Or do you ever wish you had access to hundreds of school counseling resources at your fingertips? Well, my Impact School Counselor membership is for you. Inside Impact, you get access to hundreds of resources sorted by topic, tier, season, or monthly lesson plans. Simply log on, find what you need, download it, and use it with your students right away. You also get access to our community where you can meet like-minded school counselors to troubleshoot tough cases, get inspired, and collaborate with your colleagues. Not only that, we also know how important it is to stay on top of your professional development. That's why we offer live quarterly trainings on hot topics that you need most. Impact is designed to make your counseling life easier. I know you're super busy. That's why I've made it super simple to access everything you need in one place. This way you can spend your time and energy doing what you love the most, helping kiddos. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for all of your counseling needs so you don't have to worry about searching on different sites, paying for things here and there, you can find everything you need on demand in one place in Impact. Head over to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to watch a sneak peek video behind the scenes of what all is included in the membership. Again, that's stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to get started today. I can't wait to help you make an impact. Hey there, thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. In today's episode, I interview Brittany Blackwell. Now, Brittany is the teacher behind Teaching Mind, Body, and Soul. She's a former special ed teacher, and now she solely focuses on empowering and supporting educators to break burnout and build resilience. So we talk all about how to implement boundaries in order to reduce burnout. We talk about the stress cycle and radical self-care. This episode's super great. Brittany really shed light on a lot of things that I'm passionate about as well, and I feel like she really is the voice to a lot of the problems that we're experiencing as school counselors. So I think you're going to feel validated and encouraged after listening to this episode. Let's go ahead and check it out. Hey, Brittany, how are you today?
I am doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. So I just can't wait for what we're going to talk about today. I'm about to ask you a little about yourself, but just a little teaser for the listeners. You are like the queen and when it comes to stress management and everything. And I know my audience really needs this. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey in education to this point.
Sure. So my name is Brittany Blackwell. I am a special educator and I've been in education for 11 years. I am a previous special education coordinator, which I loved, but I returned back into the classroom after my first daughter was born because I was just working way too much and needed to focus on my family. So my husband and I have 5 kids together. So I'm all about simplification, reducing overwhelm in any aspect, because if I didn't, I'd probably go crazy.
Well, I love it. I'm looking forward to this episode personally as well.
Yes. But because I dealt with some really heavy burnout personally and professionally, I did some extensive research about self-care, personal and professional growth, stress management. And as we entered into pandemic teaching, I started sharing tips, tricks for really navigating that difficult time in teaching on TikTok with like simplification and teacher hacks that could really reduce overwhelm. But what I found was that people in education were leaving the profession in droves and citing burnout as one of the main factors for leaving the profession that they loved. And so I shifted my focus to teaching educators, school leaders, counselors, anyone in the education profession, everything that I researched over time about stress, burnout, simplification, boundaries, all that fun stuff that really isn't discussed in college and prep programs with my agency, Teaching Mind, Body, and Soul. And I began my podcast, the Resilient Teacher Podcast, in summer of 2022, just to reach and support more educational professionals. And now that's what I do. I am a teacher resilience and retention strategist. I help encourage and inspire overwhelmed teachers, leaders, schools, districts to really prioritize mental health and individualized resilience and burnout recovery so we can reduce that stress, prevent that burnout, and create the life that we're dreaming out.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I'm like jealous of how well your little elevator pitch is, like how you can just rattle off, like, this is what I do. This is who I help. I feel like I always struggle. I'm like, well, this is what I do. No, I love that. I love that. So yes, retention, so important. I know people are leaving like crazy. They're feeling so discouraged. And so it's
Absolutely.
yeah. And I mean, understandably, right? So
Right.
yes. And I want to know more about the research you did, but timing wise, so you started this research before the pandemic, is that right?
Yes, I did. I was really struggling with burnout. Like I said, personally and professionally, I was going through a divorce. I really struggled to really grasp how to change my whole life in terms of being a mom, in terms of being a teacher, in terms of being a single mom, all of these pieces that really kind of ended up together. And so I started researching how stress really impacts how you show up, how
Mhm.
you are a good mom or a good parent or a good teacher. And so, with all that research, and when I saw teachers leaving in droves and educational professionals in general just leaving, knew I had to make a difference with sustainability, burnout, stress management, all of that jazz, because I did that. I went through those steps.
Yes, absolutely. So I know that was perfect timing right before the pandemic because I feel like after that it's just gone crazy
Yes.
with people leaving and everything. So I want to know the research. I know you had mentioned something about the stress cycle. Is that right? So I've done a little presentation on the stress cycle. I did like a PD thing because I find it fascinating. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that and some other research that you've done?
Yeah. So, I think it's really important, especially for school counselors, to be familiar with the stress cycle, to be able to identify their own stress triggers, to develop those healthy coping mechanisms, model those behaviors for their students, but also be able to support their students in identifying those same stress triggers, developing those coping mechanisms for them to break their cycle as well. Because, school counselors are tasked with helping create this positive and supportive school community. And that's heavy and that's tedious. And that can really impact overall satisfaction and efficacy. And I think, you know, stress in general, having high stress, that comes from a ton of different things. For school counselors, in specific, we think about the high caseloads. I think that counselors also are empathetic in nature. They deeply care about the well-being of their students. So that can really lead to that emotional exhaustion, that compassion fatigue. And so when I talk about the stress cycle refers to the interplay between stressors and an individual's psychological, physiological responses. And the cycle can really be broken down into 4 unique stages. The first one is a trigger, a stressor, high caseloads, school and personal challenges, burnout, compassion fatigue. These trigger our bodies to have this response. And so the response that we have, our body's response to the trigger, is to release hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and that triggers our body's fight or flight response. So then we experience these common symptoms of stress: fatigue, anxiety, irritability, muscle tension, our hearts beat faster, all of those things that were evolutionary to really keeping us safe in stressful situations. But what happens is that we experience these prolonged states of stress because our work is stressful or our student is in a high stress environment. And we can't exactly do what we were evolutionary programmed to do to keep us safe. And that's run. Like, we may run in our own way. We may disassociate by watching Netflix on our work after work on our couch or something like that. But our bodies really require these intentional things that release stress, or it actually accumulates in our bodies, which can then cause real health problems that can impact us for the rest of our lives. So when we think about the stress cycle, it is so important for us to intentionally end that cycle so that we're sort of rewiring our brains to manage that stress.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love this so much. So many things I was thinking of as you were talking. One, and I was listening to something the other day that was talking about this, but like from the evolutionary standpoint, yeah, this cycle would be completed, right? Like you would run
Mhm.
away from the predator and then you're done. You've arrived to safety and you can calm back down. But we stay in these heightened states and our bodies stay in this like constant ongoing fight or flight response because we're always going back to work, right? We're always going back to the predator or whatever. We're never
Exactly.
finishing it. So I love that. And I really want to pick your brain on like strategies that counselors can use. Like, how can we complete the stress cycle? Because you gave the example of like disassociating, watching Netflix, and that's a way to kind of escape, but it doesn't help complete that. So, what can we do to complete the stress cycle?
So before I really go into some of the strategies that can really support counselors, I want to say that I have been to those professional developments before where they say like prioritize self care and all that mumbo jumbo. But I think it's been so overused that that term has really lost its power. And what can really impact the power is calling it radical self care. And so when we think about radical self care, it's like this intentional approach to taking care of your physical, your emotional, your mental well being. And unlike traditional self care, where it's kind of viewed as like indulgent or selfish, radical self care really prioritizes and values your well being as essential to overall health and success. So, this approach to self care is really not limited to the occasional pampering, those bubble baths, that manicures, that sort of thing, but really rather encompasses ongoing practices that support your overall well-being. Things like physical activities such as exercise, self-expression through hobbies and creativity, and intentional relaxation and rest are really key to not only stepping away from your job and like repositioning yourself as an individual, but caring for your wellness. So for example, I'm not like a huge gym rat or anything like that. Like physical activity to me has been a mindset that I've been working on my entire life. And it's probably because of diet culture, right? But there's research that shows that physical activity not only grounds you, brings you back to your body, your awareness, but really reduces those feelings or those levels of stress hormones, releases that stress from your body so it doesn't accumulate, causing those latter stages of burnout. And it's one of those evidence-based ways that we can kind of end that stress cycle, really changing the mindset of exercise for weight loss versus, shifting it to a priority for my mental health has really changed the way that I intentionally make time for that physical activity. So that's one way. The second way is really cultivating who you are outside of your work. So engaging in hobbies, those creative activities, laughing, playing, all of those things, when they're done intentionally, can release that stress and end the stress cycle. And it can be really challenging, right, to implement these types of things in a society that prioritizes work over well-being. But it's really essential to grasp that creativity and resting are allowing you to enjoy life, not just making life about work. And the third thing that I recommend is start automating some of those tasks that are really unnecessary for you to do every day or every week. Those tasks that are repetitive and just suck your time and energy. I have an entire course that really outlines how one can do this, but I've used it in caseload management, communication, to really reduce the amount of time and energy that I spend on tasks that are appointed that can like run in the background. So in saying that, the last thing that I recommend is above and beyond like boundaries around your time and around your energy. It is the top tier of radical self-care.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love this so much. I love the phrase radical self care. That's just so great. And to differentiate it from like those little indulgent things to like ongoing, I mean, it's necessary, it's essential, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I love reframing the workout thing because I know a lot of people have some, baggage around like working out, like you said, diet culture, like we've all been there. So I love thinking, and what it makes me think of is like, whereas sometimes you're going to work out to achieve a goal, like I want to lose this many pounds or whatever. This way, you're literally achieving the goal just by showing up, right? Just by taking the walk or doing whatever, you've already, done the part for your mental well-being. So I love that. It seems way more manageable and you can feel more successful just after like one session and whatever.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It changes your whole like mindset when you can actually see it as something that's benefiting your mental health, not just the way that you look or
Right.
something like that. So
Exactly. And I'd love to have one of these little takeaways of something for kind of like the productivity that you were saying, a way to automate a system. Can you give us an example of something that they could do at work?
So one of the things that I do is documentation's huge. Like I'm in special education, so I have to document every single thing under the sun. It's like constant. But what I've done is I've created these systems that will just kind of do these things on the back end. And so one way that I initially started out, and I offer it for free, is a parent communication documentation form. That way, I'm not writing all this stuff in a binder. Like I used to keep this huge binder and it was overwhelming because I could never keep up with all of these things that were in front of me. And so I have a free Google form. It keeps all of that information there. That way you can access it whenever you need it. And you can also tag it so that you have it going towards a specific student. That way they're not all jumbled together.
Oh, I love that. Yes, you'll have to give us
Yeah.
the link for that freebie. We'll put it in the show
Absolutely.
notes. Yes, because I like this podcast to be designed to give counselors like a actionable strategy they can do today. So you guys can go
Yes.
download that freebie. And then as counselors, we're always, writing down all of this stuff, parent communication, student logs, everything. So anyway, we can streamline that and get it out of our brain and onto a system is great. Even it reminds me in my personal life, I just created a system that's been like, it's so great, even though it's so simple. So I have a almost 6-month-old. Well, I don't know when this will air. He'll be older than that now. But anyways, at the time of recording, almost 6 months. And I'm always thinking, and like, when's the last time he ate? When's the last time he slept? Because we're not on like a strict schedule. It's just like interval wise. Like he has, 2 hours between naps and 3 hours between feedings or whatever. So it kind of varies. It's not the same time every day. And I was like constantly walking around the house, like, who's got a clock? What time is it? When's the last time Hobie ate? And then finally I'm like, and we have a nanny and my husband, and we're like all working together. So I'm like, I'm going to get a little whiteboard and put it on the fridge. And it's just going to say like the last time he ate and last time he slept. And I put the interval up there, like +3, +2, and people just go in and write it. And it sounds so simple, but it's literally like saving my life right now because I just looked up, oh, yeah, next nap 2:00. Because it was all of this like mental load that I was carrying around, like trying to think about the last time. And it was just I would look at my phone at like a picture. Like I think I took a screenshot while I was feeding him. So maybe I can go see what time that was. Like it was just crazy. So now this is like, such a simple system that I'm implementing. So that's just an example of how little things can go a long way for your stress.
I mean, systemizing in general, just like piggybacking off of that, systemizing in general really just changes the game because for teachers or for counselors or for moms, like our minds are going 500 miles a minute and we've got all of these things that we have to organize or prioritize. And it's like, if you just have a system for that and you actually kind of like go in and really structure it, it can really release a lot of stress from your life because you know when to do it or when something happened or where that system is located. So, yeah.
And I feel like this goes hand in hand with those hobbies because I'm thinking like when you're doing a hobby, you say like laughing, playing, you want to be in that present moment. And I find so many times my present moment is being robbed by like the mental labor of like, what's on my grocery list? What am I doing this? What do I have to do for work? You're like women in particular, I think, are always thinking about like a million things. So I think by using systems to automate those things, then we can really be in those present moments to complete our stress cycle. So it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that too, I actually plan in, like I schedule me time, my radical self-care time, into my planner or my Google Calendar, whichever one I'm happening to use at that current moment. And it helps me to really keep that in focus, that is a non-negotiable thing that I am doing for me in order to prioritize my mental health, and really just doing that little system, that little blip that just gives me a time to actually spend on myself has changed the game as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's just the mental shift. You're not feeling guilty like you should be doing something else because it's literally on your calendar. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Exactly.
So good. So you mentioned something about burnout, and I think this is huge, boundaries and burnout. So how can counselors implement boundaries in order to prevent burnout?
So now this is my jam right here. I think that boundary work in general can really change your life, not just your job. And so if there's a counselor out there who's like, but what is like an authentic boundary? Because I talk a lot about authentic boundaries. For me, when I talk about authentic boundaries, I'm saying that that's where you are setting your limits. And there are a few steps that you have to be aware of when you're really determining boundaries. And I always teach it in my educator framework, and each letter is a part of the process. So first you have to evaluate. You have to identify your boundary issues. So assessing the areas that are work-related, stress-related, it's spilling over into your personal life, or the factors that are really contributing to your burnout or stress. And then you have to develop, you have to set those limits. You have to determine the specific boundaries that need to be set up in order to prevent work from really impacting your personal life or the stress that it's causing you. And this could include, work hours, setting specific work hours, really sticking to them, avoiding working outside of regular hours, like especially, evenings, weekends, that sort of thing. So you're kind of differentiating where your work life is spent. Email and technology, like limiting the amount of time spent checking emails, messages, other technology outside of work hours. Consider like even setting notifications and turning them off, or setting specific times to really check emails and messages. That way you're not getting that overwhelmed. And, limiting or limits around breaks, like taking regular breaks throughout the day to really prevent burnout. This could look like as just a short walk, around your school or around your building, around your office, simply just stretching, limits around your caseload, being mindful of your caseload, really ensuring that the number of students seen is really manageable to you and doesn't cause that undue stress. And consider like delegating or seeking out like that additional support or resources if that caseload becomes overwhelming. I see this a lot with special educators, but also for counselors. Setting those limits around that is super important, and being able then to communicate that with other people. So then setting limits around your personal time, personal activities, hobbies, exercise, spending time with loved ones, really scheduling that, like I said a minute ago, as a non-negotiable in your planner is a huge shift, which kind of leads to C, which is changing your mindset. And then A, we want to adapt how we communicate our boundaries. We want to clearly do that with our colleagues, our supervisors, our students, to really ensure that everyone is really aware of and respects those limits. And then R is to reevaluate or reflect, and just regularly reviewing and checking in with ourselves and reassessing those boundaries set just allows us to ensure that we're still effective and making those adjustments as needed. Like, we can't adopt boundaries that other people have if they don't relate to who we are and what we stand for. So I refer to them as authentic boundaries, because each of us may have very different limits to our time and energy, and that needs to be addressed from an individualized perspective.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so good. What's the acronym again? Educare, is that what you said?
Educare. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. I love a good acronym. So thank you for sharing that. Yes. Boundaries are so important. I talk about this with my audience as well. When you said the email check-in, I talk about having just like a designated 15 minutes, 30 minutes just for email in the morning to like check in, and then later in the afternoon to like wait for those replies or whatever. Because if you just keep your inbox open all day, you'll lose so much time, right? Because you're just in and out of there all the time. I also talk about like setting up systems for parents, like some automated, either like an automated voicemail or an email response. It's like, I'm not at my computer right now, I'm with a student. You can contact me here, whatever, schedule a time here using this link. Anything, again, you can like automate or systematize to really like maximize that productivity, which in turn is like lowering your stress and just giving you more time. Because I know a big conversation is like taking work home, working outside of contract hours. And we really want to, have that time for our families, for our hobbies, all of those things. So I think
absolutely.
boundaries to prevent burnout. I love it. And it may feel for counselors who aren't doing this, especially because I know, special education teachers in general, counselors all have these like big hearts, right? So they're kind of selfless and they're probably like, I just want to help as many kids as possible. And I can do this and do this. And it may feel almost like weird or selfish at first to implement some of these boundaries. It may feel kind of like mean and you might have some resistance around it. But I think in the long term, it's going to allow you to be more sustainable, like in your career, and not have to, quit early because of burnout.
Yes. Boundaries, you said something a minute ago and I've forgotten what exactly you said, but with boundaries, oftentimes we think, oh, well, I have to do it this way because my friend down the hall is doing this or the other counselor is doing this. But if it doesn't really connect to who we are and we're not seeing the results from that, that's why we have to reevaluate. We have to say, what exactly is causing a lot of the stress, a lot of that burnout? Because if we start to burn out, we cannot be effective as counselors, as teachers, all of those different pieces of our life or our job or, those sorts of things. And so we have to make them authentic to us.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Radical self-care and authentic boundaries, right? Okay. I love it. I love it. Awesome. This has been so great, Brittany. Thank you. Do you have any final like self-care tips or takeaways for the listeners?
I love this. I love this that you're asking about favorite, self-care tips. But I got to be honest with you. It's not going to be the tip that I have is not what you think. It's not,
Okay.
I'm not going to give you some random tip, or my favorite self-care tip, but it's to reconnect with you, become self-aware. I'm a special educator at heart. And so anything that I think of is really directly correlated to everything needs to be individualized in order to make it meaningful. And so really deep diving into your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, your vision, so that what you do really aligns with you. If you go and start a self-care routine like skincare and running a marathon, and those don't really connect with who you are, what you stand for, it is not going to be as meaningful for you. And it's just adding undue stress, leading to not really ending that stress cycle. And, that's why I created my program. And I call it the individualized educator program, so that those of us who really don't know, how to end that stress cycle, how to authentically set those boundaries, can really evaluate with those evidence-based assessments to really reconnect and align with who you are and what you do. And I don't think that everybody needs a program, right? Some people just need to reconnect with their vision for their life in order to start really taking action and ending that stress cycle on their own terms. So I do want to share with you that, if you need something, I have a free vision planning guide that I'll give you a link for it.
Yeah.
It is how you can really start to change how you see in your career, all that jazz, because vision planning can remind you of your personal vision and your values, which then correlates back to what we talked about with boundaries and creating those authentic boundaries. It can keep you focused on what you value the most. It can align with you and allow you to feel more fulfilled. And so if you're wanting to reconnect with you, create something that's authentic to you, whether it be boundaries or burnout recovery or anything like that, I highly recommend a self-awareness practice like vision planning. But self-awareness in general is my biggest self-care tip.
That's great. I love the individualized piece. And it makes me think, because I'm like, all about the self-improvement and everything. And I was like, oh, in the morning, I'm going to start getting up and I'm going to journal and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to do yoga, and which I love those things. And I used to do that. That used to be my morning routine. But now I have a baby and we like co-sleep and I don't sleep and I don't know what's going on. I'm definitely like not waking up at 6 a.m. to go sit on my balcony and do mindfulness. So, and I was like kind of beating myself up about it. Like, oh, it's the new year. I need to get back in it, whatever. But then I was like, no, this is a season where I have young children and that's fine. In like 3 years, I can, have that crazy carved out routine. That's not negotiable. But right now, that doesn't really work. Right now, it's just my evening shower is like the only time no one's talking to me. And that's when I can kind of think, and I use my little soaps that smell good. And that's my happy place. But like, it'll change and that's okay. Like that worked for me in the past and it'll work for me again. But I'm just kind of like honoring the season that I'm in right now.
I love that. Honor that season that you're in. Absolutely.
Oh, well, this has been so great, Brittany. Thank you so much. Where can the listeners find you if they want to talk more or to find out more about your programs?
Oh, yeah. So I love connecting with other educators, especially those who are like overwhelmed, looking for ways to break that cycle of burnout, really reignite their passion. So if listeners want to learn more from me on stress management, burnout recovery, overall simplification, or automation, you can find me on Instagram. I am Teaching Mind, Body, and Soul, or TikTok. It's where I'm mostly more active. It's Miss Princess Teach. And I also have a podcast, the Resilient Teacher Podcast. It's for overwhelmed educators who want to get that support, the tools, the mindset to really reduce the teacher burnout, keep their career sustainable. I carefully create episodes that inspire teachers or educational professionals to individualize burnout recovery, talk about self-care, resilience, as well as how to prioritize your well-being, your mental health, all while making that bigger impact in your classrooms, your schools, and community. I have a new episode go live every Tuesday, and episodes kind of fluctuate between how-to types of burnout recovery. We have expert interviews, and then I do these what I call teacher pep talks, where I'm a little bit more authentic and I talk about my struggle and really help motivate, validate, inspire educational or professionals. It's kind of like my hub for bringing weekly episodes that just inspire, validate, provide sustainable strategies for all those things. So if there are educators out there who are struggling with stress, burnout, just overall sustaining their career, DM me, come hang out with me, because seriously, I want to chat about burnout, about your journey, all that good stuff.
I love this so much. Your podcast sounds amazing. We air our episodes every Tuesday as well, so you guys can listen back to back.
Yes.
Listen to one on your way to work and one on your way home.
On the way back. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Perfect. Awesome, Brittany. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. And yeah, we just so appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate it as well.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.